This new report is mind-blowing. We may finally have insight into Chris Drury's plan to retool the New York Rangers, and it is shocking. We're going to break down who he's targeting and how it's going to work in this episode of Rangers Digest. But before we do that, a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. About 70% of you who watch these videos are not actually subscribed to the channel. So if you want to do yourself a favor, it's free. Hit that subscribe button and you get to stay up to date with everything New York Rangers. And that's right, a pretty crazy report just dropped. But before we get into that report, I want to highlight that obviously last week, the New York Rangers traded Jacob Trouba. Now, there was another report that they obviously wanted Cam Fowler in that deal. And by they, I mean the Anaheim Ducks wanted to send Cam Fowler the other way in this deal back to New York. But the salary, the Rangers would have only saved about $2 million in this move. And now, obviously, they offload all of Jacob Trouba's contract, which I think sets up a bigger move. And I was talking about that in my video yesterday in terms of a trade, but we may now have more insight into what Chris Drury's plan actually is. And it might not be a trade for a big fish this year, but rather waiting for free agency to completely change the identity of this team and completely retool this team. And this is from Emily Kaplan of ESPN on Vince Mercogliano's latest podcast. And she said, any of these top names that you're going to see available this summer or next, whether it's Mitch Marner, Mikko Rantanen, it says Mike Rantanen, but Mikko Rantanen, Jack Eichel, that's a name I would keep an eye on. The New York Rangers are going to be in on them all. And I think that is incredibly interesting. And obviously, not only that, but this is from Emily Kaplan as well. I do think there's a reasonable future where Brady Tkachuk does come play in the States, and obviously the New York Rangers would be a place I think he would be interested in. It's very clear that the New York Rangers have had interest in this player dating back to when he was a draft prospect. And we know that back then when he was drafted, the Rangers were obviously keeping an eye on Brady Tkachuk, and he ended up going to the Ottawa Senators. So lots to go through here. I mean, we can start with Mitch Marner. He is a free agent this upcoming summer. He is one of the better players, I believe, in the league. There has been a report for both him and Mikko Rantanen wanting $14 million, but both their teams are instilling basically a internal salary cap where you can't make more than the best player on the team. So for the Leafs, it would be Austin Matthews, and then obviously in Colorado, Nathan MacKinnon. Now, if you look at Mitch Marner's stats, having a fantastic season so far this year, 38 points in 29 games so far. He's just 27 years of age. He's going into his 28-year-old season. He plays in every situation. This is a guy who plays 5-on-5. He plays on the penalty kill. He's a very good penalty killer. He plays on the power play. He plays upwards of 22 minutes a night, usually this season averaging, about 22 minutes. So he is a premier player in the league, and I feel like he is going to garner a lot of interest this free agency for sure. The Rangers being in on this player, I believe that in the open market, he's going to demand at least $14 million. And we saw what Draisaitl just got in Edmonton as well. So he's going to demand $14 million. And speaking of $14 million, another player that is going to demand $14 million is a cup champion in Mikko Rantanen. He has proven what he can do in the playoffs, even this year on a, I'll use the word struggling loosely, Colorado Avalanche. 43 points in 31 games. Again, plays upwards of 22 minutes a night. He's a big body. He's won a Stanley Cup. He's still only 28, so he's right in his prime. Again, it looks like he's going to be demanding $14 million. We'll get into how the cap works later in the video. And then, of course, you look at Brady Tkachuk. This would be via trade if this were to happen. This is a younger option. He's about 3 years younger than everyone else I just mentioned. He's 6'4". We know what he brings to the table. It's similar to his brother. This guy would be a game breaker, a game changer for the New York Rangers. He is a captain in this league, 31 points in 28 games with a bad Ottawa Senators team. Now, he doesn't bring as much to the table as a guy like, let's say, Mitch Marner. He doesn't play as much. He doesn't play in every situation like Mitch Marner. Same goes for, a guy like Mikko Rantanen, who's won a Stanley Cup. But I think that Brady Tkachuk could be a game breaker for the New York Rangers. And I think it's incredibly interesting if the New York Rangers are indeed targeting these players, are going to wait it out. And I think another thing that came up as well on the expectations for this season, because a lot of people are expecting before the season began to go deep in the playoffs again, to be a Stanley Cup contending team, and the New York Rangers are probably going to make the playoffs, maybe in a wild card spot. Expectations are that this is not a year for a long playoff run, and that this is kind of a transition and retool season. I think that's very interesting, because that might give insight into this now, where Chris Drury may see the season as let's just see how far we get. If we lose in the first round, it is what it is. If we even get to the playoffs the way the team is playing right now, and then take this summer to completely retool this team. And I think the Rangers, on one hand, have a tough time developing young talent. And, for years, they've continued to do this. Wait for a big fish to hit free agency, offer them a lot of money. Artemi Panarin, he wanted to play in New York. It worked out perfectly. So I wonder if one of these players, I know Mitch Marner wants to stay in Toronto. Mikko Rantanen, I think, has won a Stanley Cup. I think he wants to make a lot of money, get paid what he's worth. So he could be an option as well. And Jack Eichel, I wonder if he wants to stay in Vegas. I believe he would, but things change in Vegas very rapidly, and we've covered that on the channel as well. And one thing to keep in mind is obviously the salary cap heading into next season. You have a guy in Igor Shesterkin you just signed to the richest contract for a goaltender in league history, and obviously you have K'Andre Miller coming up. We can get into that right now, actually. You have K'Andre Miller is coming up as an RFA. He wants a significant raise. I'm not sure he deserves that. Ryan Lindgren, with his play at least this year, but Ryan Lindgren is obviously up at the end of this year as well. Zach Jones, you're going to have to re-sign to, probably won't be a rich contract or anything like that, but you're going to have to start thinking about that as well. Obviously, Braden Schneider was signed last offseason, so you have him for a couple more years. When you come to the forward group, though, Riley Smith, I would imagine they would let go. So maybe you go out and sign a big fish, right, that can play in the top six there instead of Riley Smith. And, throughout the rest of the lineup, again, Adam Edstrom, Will Cooley is, probably your best forward this year. So that's going to demand, he's going to demand a bit of a raise there. I don't think it's anything too significant anyway. And it'll probably be a bridge deal. We'll see what happens. Lafreniere signed a sweetheart deal as well. So you still have Panarin, Zibanejad making a lot of money, right? Chris Kreider's still there. There could be another move coming. So I think it's very interesting. They absolutely could make this work if they wanted to retool on the fly per se, but they're probably going to have to get rid of one other piece to really make this work, so they still have a bit of flexibility heading into next season and trade deadlines and what have you. And speaking of trade deadline, with the Jacob Trouba trade, that the New York Rangers now have $21.9 million of trade deadline cap space to use, so they actually could do something at this trade deadline depending on how they play the next couple months. I think Chris Drury is really going to make a move here depending on how the team is playing. It could be a trade, or maybe he just waits for the offseason. It's going to depend on how this team comes together and plays. It's very interesting, but they have a lot of cap flexibility at this point in time. It's very interesting. Like I mentioned, Will Cooley, he's going to demand a bit of a raise. We'll see what that looks like, but he has been their best player this year. I think him, Hedl, and Kakko have all been fantastic, especially when they were playing as a line together. But again, in 28 games, he has 22 points. I don't know if anyone really expected this from Will Cooley this year. We knew he was going to progress, but this has been a breakout season for him. He's already, he's going to smash his career high in points this season on a team that is struggling a little bit. So that's impressive. And I just mentioned Kaapo Kakko as well. Don't know if Chris Drury wants to move on from this player. And personally, since this channel started last summer, as the season was wrapping up, I've always been a big fan of Kaapo Kakko, and I don't know if trading him is a good idea. I think he's really coming into his role right now, and he's giving them a lot of good minutes, and he's responsible, right? And he's using his body. I think that trading him would be a really tough decision for the Rangers. I think that they should look at offloading some more bigger contracts at this point in time, but we'll see what happens. A lot of the guys have no movement clauses, and of course, it looks like Chris Drury's plan is to wait for the offseason to add a big fish, because obviously this, I think, was a sign that he has bigger plans than just offloading some salary. A move is coming, could be a trade depending on if the team plays well the rest of the season in the next couple months, or it could be a complete retooling in the summer. But one thing is for sure, I don't think Chris Drury is complacent with where they're at right now. I think he wants to build a winner. Again, I think he wants to go deep in the playoffs, but this season at this point could be a lost cause, and just load up, retool for next season. It's very interesting. Let me know what you think in the comments of Chris Drury's plan, or supposed plan, from a couple insiders. And if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with everything New York Rangers.